Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. Today I'm joined by Carsten Busch, who you might know as the safety mythologist, and we talk about why he came up with that name as the starting point of today's conversation. But it's a recording of a really interactive, really enjoyable, really value add, in my opinion, safety roundtable session that Carsten and I hosted. And the premise of this was, what's the worst thing you can say to a safety professional? So we had some suggestions and we take live audience suggestions as well. And we kind of go through these same old sayings that you hear again and again and kind of discuss them. So, is there merit to them? If not, why not? How can we overcome them? What should we do to address those kinds of scenarios? So it was a really engaging discussion, a really popular one. So I'm sure you will also get something great from it. Trust you enjoy it. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you're like Carsten and I on European time, or good morning or good evening, depending on wherever you might be in the world. Thank you for joining us today for this Safety Roundtable session. And we're going to be speaking in hopefully a really interactive and fun and interesting way about some of the worst things you can say to a safety professional. If you've not been to a safety roundtable before, just quickly as an introduction, they are interactive events. So the idea is we do a session every couple of weeks and we do a different topic each time. It could be me talking about something and introducing some ideas, and or myself and a guest. And then we open it up to interactivity. So we really encourage you to get involved in asking questions, giving your perspectives, etc., etc. And do come along regularly and do invite your friends, colleagues, no enemies allowed. But anybody you know that's interested in safety and risk would be very welcome to join us. So, got a great guest today, which is Carsten Busch. And Carsten, I thought maybe we could start by you could just give a very quick intro to yourself, particularly what's a safety mythologist?
Oh dear, safety mythologist. Let's take that first. That was just fun, or me making fun of people who have all these awesome titles and a lot of letters behind their names on LinkedIn. And I thought, let me try something a bit different. But of course, it plays in with my first book, Safety Myth 101, which I wrote ages ago. And well, I like the mythologist. It's different than professional or thought leader or whatever you see online. As for introduction, I have 30 plus years in safety and quality and related stuff. In some European countries now, mostly Netherlands and Norway. Many of those years in railways, and lately in law enforcement, which is not my professional background, but a fascinating area to work in. And of course, I'm a total safety nerd. I've written a couple of books and done some digging into ancient safety writings, and currently doing a PhD on why people like us go for certain concepts. And I guess some of those concepts will pass along as we talk this afternoon, because I saw some slogans in the suggestions. And let me just thank you, Christian, for inviting me here. This is going to be fun. We're mostly unprepared, but I
Yeah.
want to thank all the people online and probably here on the roundtable contributing some really interesting stuff to discuss. I
Yeah.
think time will pass in like this.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. No, it's great to have you. And this was your suggestion for a topic, which I thought was fantastic. So, what we're going to do basically is go through some of the sayings, phrases, misconceptions, or perhaps they're not misconceptions, but some of the things that we might hear, you know, daily, weekly, monthly, frequently from people who perhaps are not as au fait with safety as the likes of us on the call today, and just really try and go through them, demystify them, talk about whether there's any merit to them, and how to kind of deal with situations like that. So we'd love to get some suggestions and some people kind of coming up and chatting with us on the Zoom. We'll monitor the chat. I'll monitor the chat on LinkedIn as well because this is going out live on LinkedIn. So feel free to, if you're on the Zoom, go to reactions, raise your hand, and you can come and chat to us and talk about some of the sayings and phrases that you hear that drive you a bit crazy. But as Carsten said, we've had loads and loads of suggestions that we've already had in from people as well. Now, let's start with Carsten with one which I know is one on your kind of bugbear list, which is I think you call this safety terrorism. So hold the handrail, reverse park, that kind of thing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I felt that that one was coming, so I prepared a bit mentally. And first, I need to, for the record, I think handrails are brilliant stuff.
Yeah,
I use them almost every morning. Whenever I go to the office, I work in Oslo and I take the train and I have to get up quite early, 5 o'clock. And 5 o'clock in Norway is half of the year. It's really, really, really dark. So I will hold the handrail while going down. I do that, but I do that of free will and a bit of common sense, just to hint on another topic, and not because there's some rule that I should. And I think that's the thing that irks me when people speak about holding the handrail. In some situations, the rule makes perfect sense to me. Like when you're offshore and your installation is quite wobbly. I think it's wise and probably everybody would do. But in an office building, I'm really sorry. I think people should be able to decide for themselves whether they need it or not. And that's terrorism bit. But what really drives me nuts is when people start talking about, oh, we saw this director and that came out of the opera and he told his wife to hold a handrail. They have such a brilliant safety culture in that organization. Really, that makes me puke. It's oh. But yeah, I get why people do it, and now I'm calm again.
So if somebody what would you say to somebody then who moves to a business and let's say they're coming in a sort of safety role and that's the kind of current way of approaching it? How would you sort of suggest they should try to if they agree with you that it's a bit over the top? How would you suggest dealing with that?
Can you ask a question again? I lost you halfway.
Oh, sorry. So I was just saying, if somebody came in and they were into a business and then that was the current culture, how would you suggest that they should deal with that?
I think I would start asking what their rationality would be for demanding it. Because yeah, is it kind of overprotectionism or is it some kind of dogmatic thinking or whatever? Yeah. I think I would start an open discussion and ask, why would that make sense to you?
Mm. And from somebody that spends their life looking at people falling over, I'd also be asking, what have you done to check that taking the staircases, that they're correctly built and they've got the right proportions and all this sort of stuff, thinking about the environment, because quite a lot of these sayings, I feel, come from a place of we haven't done enough to manage the environmental and the engineering controls around safety risk, and therefore we're going to try and put everything on the people, and sort of blame the people if something goes wrong.
Well, that's a very good point you have there, because that's often where I try to turn the discussion when it gets on reverse parking, which is that other rule. We shall reverse park because it's safer. It's not safer per se. It's safer in some conditions. That's the first point. And I think reverse parking makes totally sense for organizations like ambulances and police and fire, which have to drive out quite fast. But otherwise, it depends a bit on the task. And I only shake my head when I see people reverse parking in shopping malls with the baggage to the wall so that they can't load their groceries and so on. Which I think, haven't you thought? Anyway, but the if you start a discussion, why should we reverse park? Yeah, because it's safer. Yeah, but you put the safety on me then. Why don't we design the parking spaces so that you don't have to reverse park, or that everybody just can forward park? And well, people probably shut up then.
It is useful to reverse park if you're doing a bank robbery and you need to get away fast.
Yeah, that's my argument for police forward
Yeah,
or reverse parking and
yeah,
the fire department and so on.
yeah. No, that definitely does make sense. Tamara, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come and have you got a saying for us to discuss?
Actually, I want to return to handrails for a second.
Okay.
Not that I'm a zealous about handrails, but just an interesting thing. So, sometimes I use handrails, sometimes I don't. I kind of go through like, do I need the stability when I'm going down the stairs, right? Especially if, say, like we're wearing heels
Hmm.
and we're going downstairs, sometimes we need that extra stability when we're going downstairs. But the interesting thing happened is that I had my staircase redone, right? And in the process of setting up the handrail, we took actually a lot of time before we put the handrail onto the wall, adjusting it so that there's two different heights in the house. Myself, I'm 5'4", and then Kaylin, who's about 6 feet, right? And they took the time to adjust the handrail so that it was good for both of us, believe it or
Hmm.
not. I know that seems a little weird because one person's so tall and the other one's so short, as well as the length of the handrail, where it starts and where it ends. And the weird thing is now we use the handrail more now than we ever have in the 25 years of living in this house. So I think there's also something, and it's natural, right? We just naturally grab it because it's located in a place that even before we get going on the stairs, you feel more comfortable grabbing it. So what are people's thoughts about that? Like how the design of the handrail might make it more of a nudge if in our minds we're seeing it's facilitating something. Just putting it out there.
Okay, can I just react? I think that's a brilliant thing you bring in there, Tamara, because often it's just a thing about behavior, not like making a rule, you shall reverse park, or you shall hold the handrail, or whatever we want from people. But if you design the environment that it becomes the natural thing to do, then we don't need to rule anymore because people do it automatically. So that was a great example. Thank you.
Yeah, that was
It would
very
be,
good.
I'm just going to chime 1 second for, again, it would be really good to do a topic on nudging.
Yeah, yeah. We'll pick that up, definitely. Naomi, joining us all the way from, is it sunny for you or is it nighttime for you in Australia?
It is nighttime, 7:45
Yeah.
p.m. And I
Well,
haven't been
thank you.
on. No, thank you. It's good to be back. I haven't been on for a while just because the time hasn't worked out.
Yeah.
But I've managed to get my son into bed on time tonight, so I'm like, yay, go me.
Well done.
I love the question for this week's topic. And my key saying that is said to me constantly as a safety professional, it's what we've always done. Now, this is a nugget in itself, and probably you could talk for hours just on this conversation. But I suppose the one key point that I like to make when I hear this sentence is that I don't blame people for sticking with the known, because the known is a safe place to be. I think the problem here is that in remaining in that safe place, it leaves you not without capacity to move forward into a better option, if that makes sense. So as safety professionals, we're all about trying to find a better solution to a problem. So it's what we've always done. That key phrase, that key sentence that said to a safety professional, I think it just kind of limits you to not going beyond, not stretching beyond the box kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Mm. It absolutely makes sense, yeah. And I think the example I was gonna say, which we can unpack alongside that is a similar one, which is we've been doing it this way for so many years and nobody's ever got hurt. And the analogy I like to use there is, just because you've been driving without a seatbelt for 20 years and you haven't had an accident doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. But I like that piece about growth.
Yeah, so it's just that there's comfort in what's known because it's safe in the known. And as you said, like if someone has been driving without seatbelts for so many years, they've learnt that that is safe to do so. So again, it's that going beyond that current learning of this is where it's safe to what is a safer place to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Carsten?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it while you spoke, Naomi, and it's one of the things when I started in way back in the early 90s in safety. I often got that. Well, it's now posted in the chat here. We've been doing it for this like 30 years, and it was always the number 30, which puzzles me. And that's can be quite a frustrating thing, but if you reflect a bit on it, it may be also a good reminder for us that, as you say, people like safety, things they are comfortable with. On the other side, people are also open to new stuff, but it shouldn't be too outlandish new. So I think stuff they're familiar with and using that in a way to sneak in the new stuff, build on that what's good, what is existent, and then provide some new stuff to it is probably a good strategy. So I think we, to a certain degree, we can use that comment in a positive way to get them on our side, if you get what I mean.
Absolutely, and I really liked what Naomi said about the opportunity to grow. I think for me, what this saying or comment pulls out is something around psychology, because there's something that is comfortable, there's some feeling of safety, there's some reason there may be reluctance to change, but there's some reason why someone is doing it this way, habits, etc. And it's quite hard to break some of those cycles. So I think this encourages us to try to understand, why they feel that way, because there are lots of reasons they could feel that way. And then we can try to have that conversation with them about, well, there could be a better way, and are people going to be open-minded to that? But yeah, it's not the easiest thing to do. What about you're trying to raise your hand, Deirdre? Do you want to just unmute and chat?
Thank you. Just to echo what Naomi said there. So one thing that I've realised, so I'm effectively the head of health and safety to a business who have typically always outsourced their health and safety needs. They've always remained compliant, but they've never been in a situation where someone has had to deep dive into their systems, which they didn't actually have. So I've just recently, February, joined a company. I've created the health and safety management system from scratch. And then obviously you have the communication of that system, training, etc., etc. So I've had quite a few people say, well, it's going to take a lot of time, isn't it? Or you're, giving us extra work. As well, first of all, it should have been here in the first place. So although, our main purpose is to ensure that people go home uninjured, alive, and to keep the company compliant, it also drags you to, an elevated level of communication. So which includes behavioral safety, psychology, and actually how can I convince this person this is the right thing to do, rather than, going around pointing fingers with clipboard and, telling people everything they're doing wrong. How can I involve them into the process? How can I persuade them to trust me that what I'm talking about and what I'm trying to relate is the right thing to do? So Naomi so rightly pointed out that people like to stay in that comfort of safety. So it's the fear of the unknown. So people either make fear-based decisions or, confidence-based decisions. A lot of the time it's because obviously they don't have a clue most of the times about legislation and what it means. So I think for me personally, it's down to the art of conversation and persuasion. And I'm getting there. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of these points, don't know if you agree with me, Carsten, but a lot of these points are ones that the way to kind of deal with them is to try and open up that dialogue and that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the key things is always showing people what's in it for them and helping to make their day easier, safer, and easier. And well, then they will over time lose the feeling of that it's something extra you put on them. Because in the short term, it may look like that when you come in with an incident system and then all of a sudden they need to fill out something and analyze something and then find actions and so on. But it's just part of their job, but then systemized.
Yeah.
Deirdre, you want to say more?
Yeah, it was quite a coincidence that you've just ended with that. One of the main, so the company that I work for, they've all been there for a very, very long time. They're all very good at what they do. So I made a point of saying, I'm not here to tell you how to do your jobs. I'm just here to control the risks out of what you do. So I think in the back of their mind, they feel, well, she's coming here and telling me what to do and telling me that I can't do this. I must do it this way. So I think for me, that helped them understand that, although I'm the new, bad person in town or whatever, or the fun police, as somebody mentioned in the chat, I've repeated myself over and over. I'm not here to tell you how to do your job. I'm just here to control the risks out of, what may arise of what you do. So that's also helped.
Yeah, definitely don't be going around calling yourself the bad person. That's the you won't succeed that way.
I'm winning over hearts. I'm winning over hearts.
Hearts and minds and all that good stuff.
Yes.
Claudia or Claudia, depending on how you pronounce your name, you were saying you wanted to come and give us something.
Hello, how are you? It's Claudia. I have a kind of a personal story. I fell on my own job. it was actually, I do floor failure analysis, but I'm an walkway auditor, but we really stress more on the side of slip, trip, and fall for what comes out of flooring and so forth. But speaking of handrails, my daughter just built we call it the tube, but she just built a multifamily 4-story home. And I had, when prior to this period, I had been on my job about 8 years ago, and I stupidly put a piece of wood flooring next to the door so I wouldn't forget it. And I flew up in the air, and I know flying in the air doesn't end well for anybody. And I flew up in the air and I broke my femur right at the job. So I actually had to experience firsthand what it was like, because I basically had to teach myself to rewalk because I didn't need a hip replacement. And it was a very interesting journey, I could say. But the reason I brought the banisters up is, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, it doesn't just stop, on the construction side or the defect side. Unfortunately, their banister wasn't finished right. And I grabbed it because I didn't want to fall down the stairs. And I ended up getting a splinter in my hand that I almost had to go to the hospital for.
Wow.
And I had to just take my flooring expertise and everything off and just get the heck out of this. Because I'm supposed to visit that residence for, to see my daughter and my future son-in-law, and they have a 60-pound dog. So it's all these different environmental things that that take place too.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, sorry to hear about that, but I'm glad that it didn't turn out too badly in the end. Carsten, here's one for you. We comply with all the regulations. We're compliant.
Congratulations. Yeah, well, it's one view of safety, and it's quite a popular view amongst some people, and it's also a bit of a commonsensical view. And I think many people here will probably have children. I think we start teaching children using rules. And our assumption is that if they comply with our rules, they will be safe. So they don't cross the street at red, and they don't play with knitting needles close to the electrical outlets and all that kind of stuff. And of course, we make the environment as safe as possible. The thing is, when we get older, we will find out that rules only take you so far. And also that if you try to cross the street and there aren't any cars, but the light is red anyway, that following the rule, stop at red, doesn't make you a lot more safe. So I think following rules and being compliant, that's good, because often the rules and the regulations, that provide some kind of bottom line that you shoot at the lowest level. A problem is if you're aiming for compliance, then that's probably as far as you get. So if that's your ambition, being compliant, then you're setting your aim pretty low, I guess, because you're aiming at the lowest level, and you probably can go further.
Yeah, there was a saying from, I can't remember which Liverpool Football Club manager it was, but it was one of the big famous ones, Bill Shankly or one of those, and he said, I really should know this, but he said, if you aim for the stars, you might get to the clouds. I think if you aim for the ceiling, you won't get off the floor.
Yeah, but that's a really nice one. Also, and that may complicate stuff. We shouldn't forget that rules nearly always are compromises that are forged in a political arena. and they don't represent an absolute level of safety. If you look at many of the and that's not my field of expertise, all the action levels for chemicals and dust and so on. It's not necessarily say the real safe level, but it's a compromise out of various various. I don't have the word now. Sorry.
All the different opinions of the various
yeah,
parties that have vested interests
interest was the word I was looking for. I had the Norwegian word in my mind, so thank you. it's the different interests because often there's industry lobby, there's what's possible technically and what is enforceable, and all those interests play in, and then they select a level that is deemed safe for the moment, and then after a couple of years we find out well, maybe we should have another level.
It's interesting you say that, because I hadn't actually thought of that before, and it's making me think of. I'm currently reading a book by a guy called Rory Stewart, who was a politician here in the UK, and he sort of paints this picture of how Parliament works, and I'm sure it's the same or similar in around the world in other countries as well. But where, as you say, it's just a battle of compromises, and actually nothing they ever achieve seems to be really particularly good. It's just kind of the best that they can do to get everyone happy and get it through in the time allowed, and all of this other stuff. So actually, if you think of, as you say, health and safety law from that perspective, then that, I think, should open your eyes to questioning whether that is enough, and should we be trying to do a bit more. So yeah, I think that's a really good good analogy to think of. Isaac, go on, Carsten.
No, well, I was saying, and this goes back really to the beginning of safety, actually, because the first safety laws in England, 1833 or something, guarding of machinery, the implementation was delayed by 10 years because of the vested interests of factory owners who moaned about rising costs, and they needed to refurbish the whole infrastructure and so on.
Yeah, there we go. Real life example from back in the day. Isaac.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Long time, no see you, but it's great to be back. One thing that I heard most of the time is, why bother? It's just a ticking boxes exercise. So we got people don't really feel the value of doing things in a safe way because they think that it's just for regulation purposes. It's not like the company actually care about them. So I don't know what's the taking on that.
Yeah, I mean, I see that a lot. What's interesting about that to me is that you often see the reverse. By that I mean, health and safety can sometimes put in place a lot of box ticking, and therefore you're kind of almost supporting that thought from people that aren't involved in health and safety. So getting away from that box ticking, I think, is really important. We need to obviously prove what we're doing. Certainly here in the UK, if something goes wrong, they're going to be looking for your policies and procedures, A, and then B, the proof you've actually done it. So you need to be able to prove what you're doing. But cleaning checklists, ticks. We view this area every 15 minutes tick. But is that really helping? Are you really doing what you should be doing? Very much open to interpretation. What are your thoughts on that one, Carsten?
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. You've probably heard what Drew Ray and David Proven call the safety of work and the work of safety. The one part is that you actually improve on the risks, so that's the safety of work. The other is all the safety stuff we do around that, like the box ticking, just to document that that something has been done, or to make sure that you keep your certificate and so on. And there's a lot of that in safety, and also in other related fields. And yeah, I think it's a problem. It's especially a problem when how should I say this? There's been a lot of so-called deregulation in recent years, which basically means government takes a few steps back, gives more how should I say, more goal-oriented rules, and then leaves it to the parties, to organizations to fix safety. And what you see is basically a movement then that stuff has become much more bureaucratic because of governments taking a step back and not making all these precise rules. This is how we should do it. Leave it to organizations, and then organizations become very defensive and start requiring certificates and documenting everything they do, just in case that something happens, that they can show here. I have the certificates. My contractors have certificates, and I audit them regularly, and we have documented all our job safety analysis. And yeah, that's where a lot of the paperwork comes from, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Naomi, do you want to come back in?
Okay, so we've just hit a topic of passion for me, because in Australia, I'll give you guys this terminology. We don't call it box ticking; we call it tick and flick. It rhymes. It's kind of cool as well. But anywho's, with safety compliance, the question that I would then go ahead and ask is, are you actually being compliant to be compliant, or are you applying that compliance? So the rules and regulations that we have here and that paperwork that we have in place is simply just verification only that you're saying that you're doing what you say you're going to do. It's not, I can walk around with Take 5s and JSAs and think we're all fine and dandy and safe. But this, at the end of the day, that tool, that risk management tool, is not going to protect me from having an incident. What's going to protect me from having an incident is me applying what's written in that particular tool to my daily work practices. So as everyone's saying coming through, like safety starts with you, they're absolutely 100% correct. Safety needs to be worked into the workplace culture that's that we're living in every single day. So I've been in organizations where safety is not part of the culture at all, and it's considered a joke and considered that just a piece of paper and considered that legislation. But then my current workplace has had 0 LTIs since 1989. So like, that's a great metric to have. And the reason that they've got that is, well, as people saying coming through, they're kept accountable. Their safety is ingrained into the culture, and the paperwork and that compliance is simply a verification of what's happening, not the other way around, not saying we're going to do it and then going and doing the complete opposite of what's written on the paper. So it's part of the culture, and it has to be part of the culture in order to make a difference in people's lives and send people home from work in a safe way.
Thanks, Naomi. Any thoughts on that, Carsten? And I think we should pick up on this piece of, it starts with you, or safeties. Who's responsible for safety? Look in the mirror, that kind of thing. Maybe you could build on that as well.
Yeah, I wanted to get back to the compliance bit. because and it's perhaps a bit of the same that we've talked before. But the question is often, are we trying to be compliant to be compliant? And does that make compliance a goal? Or should we rather do the right stuff and then find out that, oh, look at that, we are actually compliant? Because I think if we do the right stuff in safety, we will, in most of the cases, be compliant, and there's not too much, compliance work necessary in addition. Maybe we need to document something, but that's peanuts probably. And I think it was Peter Drucker, probably who made this distinction between doing the right thing or doing things right. And I think let's start by doing the right things and then doing those right, of course.
Yeah, I like that. Loretta.
Hiya, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we've got you
Yes.
loud and clear.
So I just want to give a take on the compliance one because I work with the NHS. So I deal a lot with our facilities team. So the housekeepers, porters, security, grounds and gardens guys. So with compliance, I recently did a PPE audit on compliance, and I happened to find out that managers are ticking the boxes saying we consult staff before we give them PPE. So literally a catalog is put out. So for example, if you want footwear replaced, a catalog is put out, and then you choose which of the shoe safety boots you want. However, when you speak to staff, it's a different thing altogether. They're saying we are not consulted. When you say you want safety boots, they are just handed the safety boots. These are what we have and these are what you get. However, it's a different story on the manager's side. And then it comes down to being compliant. There's just ticking of the boxes and saying our budget is £50 per boot per staff. So we cannot go any way above it. What is the best way to go about this? Because I've had a chat with some of the staff and they are willing to augment this price. So if proper boots are going to be about £100, I'm willing to pay the 50. You take the 50, but staff are just being handed those. So it all comes back to, are we being compliant for compliance sake, or are we doing are we being proactive? Are we being reactive? Are we doing what will make staff safe and comfortable at work? Because I literally have staff whose toenails are gone. So unfortunately, it is a bit dicey when you've got two coins, two sides of the story, and you're trying to reach who's telling the truth and who's not. And it becomes a bit difficult to dissect it if you want to be a bit diplomatic about it. If it's something we can discuss.
Yeah, that's not an easy situation to deal with, is it? I mean, I think how could you approach that? There's a few ways you could approach it. You could approach it as you have done there by saying, look, the staff are willing to contribute, or some staff willing to contribute. You could also be looking into, what's the performance of this footwear, because, this is a sweeping generalization, but normally if something's cheaper, then it's probably not going to be as good in one way, shape, or form as something that's slightly more expensive. So you probably need to try and figure out what the differences are and try to communicate those differences in such a way that it makes sense for the powers that be. And I suppose make the point as well that we've been talking about, kind of overarching this, which is, are we trying to just be compliant and say we've given everyone safety footwear, or are we actually trying to be safe and give people footwear that is going to keep them safe? Any thoughts on that, Carsten?
This is quite a difficult case, and hard to discuss if you're not in the situation, and we know so little about your situation, Loretta. So take everything we say with a grain of salt, but as a well-intended suggestion. I wonder whether the best way forward would be to start with trying first the risk-based approach, which I saw in the chat. What is the risk and what do we need to control the risk? I think that's the first thing, because there are different kinds of footwear, and you need something that's suitable for the risk. And based on that, perhaps try to figure out together with the workforce or workforce representation what would be the suitable footwear to control that risk, and then set that standard. I think in those situations, some kind of a rule, this is what we need and this is what we need to get, is very useful. And I definitely wouldn't give them a catalog and pick something, because that can go all kinds of ways. They can be heavily overdressed, or they can go for those fancy sneaker-looking safety shoes that perhaps are not suitable in the situation. But I don't know where you work, so it's, as I say, take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, thanks for that, Carsten. Now, we're about 45 minutes in, so we've got a bit of time left, but I want to make sure we cover this one because this is one that I know riles a few people. Give us your thoughts on this, Carsten. Safety is our number one priority.
Yeah, nice. Let's shut down business and enjoy margaritas on the beach. Which can be quite dangerous, of course. But yeah. Well, I recently watched a webinar with Ivan and Krista, and they had T-shirts on safety third, because that's more like reality. Production first and production second, and then we have time for safety.
If if somebody said to you, I'm working with an organization and they're saying this, would you see that as a red flag, or would you see it as well-meaning but perhaps not very well thought through? How would you kind of rank or rate an organization that was saying that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a red flag or anything. I think it's something that some people feel belongs to the ritual when we speak about safety. Safety first, of course, and it's just one of the things that you say. But we have to let me say it differently. Everything we do tends to have two sides. One is the substantial side. The other is the symbolic side. And then there's this continuum between totally symbolic and totally substantial. And when we talk about safety, the substantial bit is about reducing or controlling risk in most of cases, and symbolic is just showing that safety is something important. And as a simple example, if I go to a workplace, or if we go to a workplace, what do? We dress up. We put on safety shoes, we put on some yellow stuff, or orange, or whatever the color is that we need to do. We put on a helmet if it's necessary, goggles, and so on. Why do we do that? For the substantial part, to protect ourselves. But then probably even more important is the symbolic part. the safety guy comes on the work floor, and the safety guy cannot be seen walking around in torn jeans and sneakers and a t-shirt. The safety guy has to set an example and play the part. And I think safety is our top priority. It's very much on the symbolic side of the spectrum. We show through some hyperbole, because top priority is a hyperbole. I think that safety is something that we need to pay a lot of attention to. But then read the small print or the footnote, but it's not as important as making money and producing.
Yeah. I think walking the talk of saying safety is our number one priority is very, very difficult indeed. Simon, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come on, give us something to chat about? Unmute yourself, Simon.
Done. First of all, just want to say it's lovely to see Carsten in person, even though it's on video or whatever. And I thought that was really interesting what he said about the symbolism. I thought that was fascinating. And I'll be honest, it's something I haven't thought enough about. So I thought it was interesting and definitely something to go away for me to consider. I think that's great. What I would say is, and we've talked about this before actually, Christian, is this, it sort of aligns with, you know, the sort of zero harm concepts and things like that. I think as safety professionals, if we had a better understanding of where safety and our function fits in with an overall business, we can look to learning from people like Archie Carroll, who's written extensively for numbers of years about corporate social responsibility. And he says he's got a model which, and I'm not saying it's the only model or the perfect model, but it's a nice, easy one called the Pyramid of Corporate Social Responsibility. And what he starts off at the bottom is he talks about basically it's got to be a profitable business. If it doesn't make enough money, there is no business. It's as simple as that. I know it, you know, we don't like it, but it's true. And then the next one on his pyramid, which I'm sure Carsten's fully aware of this, he talks about legal. Well, you can't operate outside of the law. If you do, eventually you're going to come unstuck in whatever law, whether that be financial law or whatever it might be. Then he starts to talk about ethical, and then he talks about philanthropic. So the point that I'm just trying to just get across here is if we see ourselves as supporting a business function, and our idea is to support an organization or a business, if we had a better understanding of concepts like corporate social responsibility, we could be more pragmatic in the way we communicate the service that we provide for the business. And I think that's something that we need to, that we've got, you know, that we can definitely improve as an organization. So there we go. That's what I had to say. Thanks very much. Nice to meet you, Carsten.
Likewise, Simon. And I think this, what was it again? The model, the pyramid you mentioned now?
Yeah, it's Archie Carroll is the name.
Archie Carroll.
I think it's from like 1977 or something, and it's a really good model. I'm not saying it's the only model, and there aren't better ones, but I think it's nice and simple. I'll send you a link, Carsten.
Thank you. It reminds me a bit of Maslowian levels. First, you have to fulfill this, and then that, and then. Interesting that someone has thought about this in terms of organizations.
Unmute yourself, Simon.
Just to clarify, what he says is the lines are often blurred, and you shouldn't consider one out of context of others. So you know, making money, yeah, it should be our first priority, but we can't make money and break the law. Well, okay, so it's about their relationship with each other, and it's not only what we do, but it's how we go about it. And those are things that are really important. If I can just add one thing as well, which is relevant to what Carsten was saying before, do the right thing. That idea of the right thing is not as simple as it might sound. It really isn't. And ethicists create a distinction between the right and the good. So we might say working safely is good, therefore it keeps people safe, but it might not be the right thing to do because the business goes bust. So understanding how those terms, what they mean and how that can guide us as a profession are also important. So anyway, thank you very much for the chance to just say hello to Carsten and add a few thoughts.
Yeah, no, thank you, Simon. And if you're interested in exploring some of those concepts, philosophical and ethical concepts, Simon and I did a couple of really powerful podcast interviews a few months ago now, wasn't it, Simon? So you can check those out on the Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your podcasts. Isaac, do you want to come in and then we'll start to give us a point, and then we'll probably start to wrap things up.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I remember you doing one webinar about how to sell safety to companies, and I think the problem is that you don't see the value of safety until something happens. Just the problem, so it cannot be quantified. As you say, no, okay, then this year we're gonna make this amount of sales, or this year we're gonna reach this amount of target. So that's probably the issue that probably safety people have, because we don't see the value of safety people until something happens. So probably that's why business are struggling to understand safety people. That's my taking on that.
Any thoughts on that, Carsten?
Sorry, could you say the shortly once again?
Yeah,
I was a bit distracted by the chat.
Oh, that's okay.
No problem. No, I was saying that we cannot really quantify the value of safety until something happens. So that's why probably some businesses struggles with safety, because there is no value that you can put on it, as reaching target or sales or customer deliveries and all that stuff. So it's quite hard to quantify the value of safety in your company.
Yeah, well, it's very hard to defend, to promote preventive stuff if nothing happens. We had this discussion recently in my organization because with all the stuff going on in the world, we've been thinking, what if one of our neighbors not just comes knocking on the door, but crosses the threshold? And what do we do then? And it's now a topic that's easy to talk about. And people are willing to think about it and prepare for it. But if nothing happens for 5 years, all that attention will be gone. That's it's what shall I say? Safety needs a good accident once in a while to stay relevant, and that's pretty cynical, but there's nothing like a good accident to create that sense of urgency. Mm-hmm. But it's better if it's a near accident that everybody recognizes. Yeah. That's the cheaper way of getting the sense of urgency that everybody, that went well.
Yeah, sometimes something bad needs to happen to shake things up a bit, shall we say? Yeah. Great. Well, look, guys, conscious of time, I don't want to keep anybody for longer than the allotted hour, particularly yourself, Carsten, because you've been very generous with your time today. So thank you very much for sort of co-hosting this session with me. I think we covered a lot of really interesting ground, some great concepts that have come out of this, some different ways of thinking. And, thank you everybody for joining in and really making it nice and interactive. Before we wrap up, Carsten, if somebody wants to get in touch, what's the best way? LinkedIn, maybe, or?
LinkedIn is a good way. Just connect, and well, if there's something, if questions, and I have time, I will answer.
Perfect. Good stuff. Thanks, Carsten. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.